Hi, my name is Brittany Benito,
And my name is Rachel M. Ryan.
and in this podcast, we're going to be discussing chapters 19 through 37 of the famous novel Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This novel chronicles the story of Kaya Clark, a young girl who was pushed into seclusion in a North Carolina marsh at the age of 6 years old after everyone in her life abandoned her one by one. Kaya learned to hunt and cook on her own in order to survive, with the goodwill of Jumpin and his lovely wife Mabel as her only other support. Now moving on to our literary devices.
The phrase, the lagoon smelled of life and death at once, an organic jumbling of promise and decay, appears in chapter 20 of the novel, wherein Kaya is waiting for Tate's reappearance. This effectively represents Kaya's inner turmoil after Tate, who, in contradiction to all the others who previously deserted her, made a vow to return. Tate gave Kaya a reason to believe he would come right back to her, but he ultimately defies his word, leaving Kaya devastated deeply. This quote most likely gave the reader a sense of remorse for Kaya considering all the hardships she had to endure throughout her life, as well as made the readers feel as if they were Kaya themselves and experiencing the betrayal from Tate firsthand.
Kaya often employs metonymy when viewing the rural females from afar. Since Kaya is disliked in society for originating from the marshland and didn't remain in school long enough to learn their names, she is unaware of the identities of the females who are Chase Andrews' companions. As a result, she gives them names that reflect their distinctive physical properties, like those of Always Wears Pearls and Tall Skinny Blonde. This gave readers a feeling of sympathy towards Kaya since it further demonstrates how out of touch she is with the people around her and excluded from society.
When Tate visits Kaya in chapter 22, he catches her hiding from another individual. This encounter enables Tate to comprehend and recognize Kaya in a new light. In this chapter, Kaya is depicted as similar to an animal. The simile is as follows. Continue to look in the direction of the boat as a deer eyes the empty brush of a departed panther. From this, we may infer that Tate has now come to terms with Kaya's true lack of social skills and her animalistic or untamed instincts as a result of spending so much years in isolation in the marsh, a wild environment with a lack of rules. This scene personally makes me feel extremely bad for Kaya as well as upset with how Tate is now viewing her.
In chapter 23, it is stated, and somewhere within, she worried she was also a piece of beach art, a curiosity to be turned over in his hands, then tossed back on the sand. This quote is stated during Kaya and Chase's first date. In essence, while they stroll down the beach, they point out intriguing objects to one another, and through this, Kaya gradually realizes the huge contrast in their recent relationship. Kaya is just a marsh girl, abandoned by everyone, whereas Chase is the village's golden boy, who comes from extremely affluent parents. Because of this, Kaya does not believe Chase is genuinely interested in spending time with her, and she worries that he is merely curious about her, the infamous Marsh Girl. She fears that his main goal is to expend his interest for her, and that should he succeed in doing so, he would forsake her as everyone else has. Therefore, despite her strong attraction to him, she finds it challenging to totally become relaxed rather than guarded around him.
In chapter 30, Kaya finds out from a magazine rather than from Chase himself that Chase is actually engaged to another woman despite the fact that he claims to love her and speaks of plans to marry her and have a life with her. When she finds this out, she takes her boat and heads into the sea to escape. While out at sea, it is stated in the novel, she knew it wasn't Chase she mourned, but a life defined by rejections. I have to do life alone. From this, readers are left to deduce that Kaya never truly loved Chase. Instead, she stayed with him because he filled the void in her heart, and so she neglected all of his red flags in an attempt to avoid ending up utterly alone in life.
Kaya's home, the marsh, is frequently used as a meaningful parallel for Kaya. The marsh is a lonely, deserted location that has been left to its own affairs to flourish unrestrained, underappreciated yet bursting with capability, much the same as Kaya. This is deeply saddening considering that the only family she has ever known aren't even people, yet they taught her the meaningful lessons in life.
Speaking of those who are overlooked but possess a great deal of promise, Kaya, a young woman who only attended school for one singular day, has written two insightful publications about the marsh and the creatures that dwell there. Kaya receives substantial compensation for the publication of these volumes, which she uses to improve her home. In chapter 31, Kaya attempts to maintain whatever sense of her mother in her life that she can, which includes a stove, whilst upgrading her residence. In this chapter, it is stated, what if Ma came back and her stove was gone? Even after years of being abandoned by her mother, Kaya longs for and truly believes that her mother will one day return for her.
The theme of severe loneliness prevails throughout this novel. Kaya is cruelly ridiculed and outcasted by the majority of society, in addition to being abandoned by pretty much her entire family. Due to the fact that she stands apart from the bulk of society, she is frequently referred to as the Marsh Girl. The relationship between Kaya and the seagulls has therefore come to be the only one she could really rely on. And as a result, she frequently goes to them in challenging situations when she is feeling anguish, shame, or other similar emotions.
Throughout the course of the narrative, the gulls have become a profoundly essential symbol for family. Despite being animals, the gulls and her have a bond. The gulls welcome Kaya's presence and regard her almost like a member of the group. Upon Jodi's return, it is revealed that Missy, their older sister, was the one who originally started to nourish the seagulls and have them gather on the shore. This further solidifies the gulls' reputation of family for Kaya. Going back to the return of Jodi, Kaya felt sadness but also joy when seeing him. We were informed that he had gone to school in Georgia and was also serving in the army in order to compensate for his college tuition. He gave her his address, hoping that they will see each other soon again, and this causes Kaya to have a breakdown because of the fact that for so long she was alone and without any of her family. Him giving her his address and phone number gives her a window to escape from endless loneliness.
Throughout the course of his visit, Jody also brought some of Ma's paintings from when she was gone. There were two paintings who stuck out more than the others, one being a painting of Kaya and her siblings. And this scene was extremely important because it deepens the fact that Kaya does remember who her family truly is. She struggled to differentiate the painted figures and pinpoint the names of her siblings. In the other painting, we see a young boy next to Kaya. The boy in the painting was assumed to be Tate. This made her think back on her experiences with Tate and believe that this could be a sign from her mother. She further begins to realize that maybe Tate wasn't as bad as she made him out to be. Jody even gave her a further push towards Tate by informing her that he believes that she should give him another chance.
Aside from this, we are also informed during Jodi's visit that Kaya's mother died 2 years ago because of leukemia and was actually afraid to contact the family after being threatened by Pa. Furthermore, she dealt with a lot of mental disorders because of the abuse she endured, and also leaving her kids behind took a major toll on her health. While she was dealing with leukemia, she refused to take anything to help the pain or help her even slightly get better from it. This is quite saddening because we all saw how Kaya truly believed that someday her mother would come back, and now we know that is no longer possible. I believe that readers also went through what Kaya went through, considering that we all had hoped that maybe someday her mother would return, and we all felt the hope leave our bodies while reading the death of Ma.
Kaya utilizes her understanding and love of nature to unravel the mysteries of the universe, including interpersonal relationships. Kaya uses analogies or metaphors to nature with female insects to try to understand her relationship with males in her life. Kaya's observations are as such. The females got what they wanted, first a mate, then a meal, just by changing their signals. Kaya discovers from her observations that because men are so anxious to mate with females, females in nature possess a particular control and influence that they may use to dominate over the males.
This insight from the fireflies may be easily applied to the relationships between males and females in human relationships. As a result, this exemplifies a parallel between both animal and human conduct. Although we may consider ourselves to be relatively evolved, our reproductive customs in particular still reflect our early primordial drives, which allowed prior cultures to thrive.
In chapter 37, Kaya gets arrested after an extensive investigation where she was the main suspect. They matched the fibers found on Chase's body to a hat found within her residence.
Now it's time for Who's Done It. Bringing it back to the last episode, I mentioned how Brittany and I already know who committed the crime of murdering Chase Andrews. I also mentioned beforehand that it was obvious that it was most likely Kaya, since she knew her way around the march from basically living there her whole life. In chapter 19, it further validates that statement, considering that the police stated, "We gotta admit, if this was a murder, it was a clever one." The marsh chewed up and swallowed all the evidence if there was any. Throughout this quote, it can be deduced that the someone who knew the marsh well must have been the one who committed the crime. Therefore, it must have been Kaya, because the entirety of the novel is based around the idea that Kaya is an individual who's extremely immersed in the marsh.
I agree. I read that and immediately thought back to what we had previously said. But can I also mention how obvious it was that it was Kaya considering the fibers leading back to her, which is also the main reason as to why she got arrested at the end of chapter 37. She was honestly not the brightest leaving the hat lying around, but since it was her first time committing the crime, she definitely just didn't know any better. But I think a really big clue was the shell necklace. Kaya gave this necklace to Chase, and we found out that Chase initially went out to the marsh with it on, but was found dead without it being in sight. Chase being in the marsh and without the necklace will only lead readers to believe that it was most likely Kaya. In addition to this, readers can assume that her motive towards the murder of Chase Andrews was because of the betrayal she felt when she realized that he was planning on marrying someone else.
True. I never really thought about it that way. I think that is it for this episode. Stay tuned for episode 3, which will be coming soon.
Bye!
See ya!